Welcome to The Public Interest with David Stokes. I'm David Stokes. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important issues facing the St. Louis region in a long time, the proposed merger between St. Louis City and County. Our guest today is Dave Leipholtz with Better Together. Dave, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Dave, we've known each other for a bit of time. We don't know each other that well,
right?
But people might be interested to know that you're actually very close friends from college with my sister-in-law.
I am, in fact, and I've known her for, I don't even want to say how long.
We can even say her name. I think it's allowed. Sarah Beth.
Sarah Beth for almost 20 years, which just means we're just really, really old now. But we're friends through college, so I'm glad she's not here to share any stories.
Well, we'll send her a copy of the tape when it's done, so she can be impressed by her brother-in-law and her old friend talking policy issues in a civil and responsible way, because that's what this show is all about.
Sure.
Because this issue, the proposed merger of the city and the various municipalities and the county and certain other entities, is obviously highly controversial, but also incredibly important.
Yeah.
And to our viewers out there, we're going to have a number of shows about this over the coming year between now and I would say the most likely date for a vote, which would be November of 2020.
Right.
Nothing is guaranteed, I guess, at this point. So we're going to have proponents of the proposal from Better Together and also some of their people on the political side of it. Dave is not on the political side of it.
No, I'm not.
But we're going to have people on the political side of it, but we're also going to have opponents of it on to talk about it. We're going to have academics on to talk about it, and we're going to have journalists and consultants on to sort of give perhaps a neutral viewpoint of it. So it's something we're going to talk about a lot. And the first thing I want to ask you about, and there's no way in a 25-minute show that we can cover the entire proposal, but we're going to cover, I think, some good parts of it while we drink beer. I read in the Post-Dispatch probably about 2 weeks ago where somebody from the Municipal League called the proposal a tax dodge. And I think I'm quoting exactly there, because they said they're just trying to phase out the earnings tax. They're halving the property tax, cutting the county property tax in half, and then they're calling it just a big tax dodge. And I got to get your comments on that. I don't see that. What I see, and what you have to, is if you're suddenly putting the regional county property tax on the 300,000 residents of the city of St. Louis, including the entire gigantic downtown and central west end areas with all that commercial property. I mean, if you just put the standard county property tax on them, A, it'd be a gigantic tax increase. B, it would raise more money than probably necessary to fund any of this. Right. So having the county property tax, and I'm going to cut it over to you to explain more about it, seems a perfectly reasonable thing when you are expanding the regional, if this passes, you're expanding the county's property tax base so dramatically.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. We also, the St. Louis City Fire Department's becoming a fire district, so there's going to be a property tax there. They'll still see a small reduction, but that money is coming off as well, and so you have to look at it from the whole picture standpoint. And people like to throw out those large terms like it's a bailout or it's just all about tax reform, and it's really about reforming how we do business. And one of the things that we're confident in is there is the funding there. We spend so much more than other regions. We are so inefficient that one of the fears that we were having is that if we just left all of the revenue where it is, we'll increase efficiency, we'll be able to reinvest, and we'll have services come up without needing all of that revenue. The fear was that the government would then, as governments do, just balloon up to spend all the money that would be there, when in fact we know, and it's on our website, our projections and our analysis at bettertogetherstl.com. And so all of that is there, and we really show our work, and I think that's important. And one of the key things we wanted to express to folks is there's more than enough money here. We have a really, really wasteful system. We look at Indy, we look at Louisville, we spend $750 million more a year, and people say there's no way. Well, we have 55 police departments, 88 cities. We're doing things so many separate ways. Imagine, if you have a household and everybody had their own gas line and their own shower and bought their groceries, that's essentially how we run an entire region. So it's not too hard to get to that figure in the way that we do.
Now, the bulk of the sales tax money would be transferred over to if this passes, transferred over to the new regional city, right?
Correct.
That's obviously an enormous amount of money.
It is, and what it's going to go to is one of the things that we've kind of gotten away from, and I think the reason we've been able to balloon our taxes in some ways and how we overspend is there's not a direct correlation between I want this service and I'm willing to pay this anymore. In 1970, when that local sales tax started here, we didn't have any money coming from local sales tax. In 2 years, it's projected to be over $1 billion of our revenue, and that's how fast we've grown it. And the reason that's so attractive is if you're City A, you have 87 other cities residents that you can attract in to come shop, and you get sales tax revenue benefits from that. And that's our focus on internal competition compared to other regions where sales tax revenue is either a state revenue or it's shared much more regionally. Our internal competition between different parts of St. Louis is insane.
Well, that's indisputably true. I mean, it is insane. And I was writing about this long ago at Show Me Institute. Every city thinks they're being geniuses. They're exporting their costs of doing business onto other people via sales tax dollars. Great, except that every resident of that city is subsidizing every other city out there. It's as if it's as if you're screwing everybody else and not getting screwed yourself. But of course you're getting screwed over. I mean, everybody just jacks the sales taxes up constantly at the same time that property taxes aren't going down. So I am absolutely. Of course, I have no objection to taxes going down anyway. I would like to see it, but I certainly have no doubt that there's enough money to fund this. To that idea of government getting more efficient, though, is it frustrating to you? Because it certainly, I was disappointed when a lot of the stuff was first announced that in order to allay concerns from government employees, that both the mayor of the city and the county executive promised that they weren't going to lay off any county or city employees. Well, so is my concern grounded, or is there enough attrition in government that you're going to be able to make the cuts you need to make anyway, even if you promise not to fire people? And having worked in government, I do understand there is a fair amount of attrition each year.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we were really struck by too, is that, in the city of St. Louis, for example, I think the attrition rate in the most recent years has been 13%. And so this is not something that says that, these taxes are necessarily all gone on day one. So the savings is realized and that attrition can be realized too. And so the mayor and the county executive could very well do that because of the high attrition rates we have. Government workforces are, older than the private sector. When's the last time you heard of a government, really ramping up? Or most of the time they're trying to figure out how to pay the people they currently have. We see that with police all the time. Even the most basic of services, everybody wants to have well funded. And so in both the city and the county, those major governments, you have a higher rate of turnover because of age, because some of those jobs don't pay as well, and the economy is doing well right now, and so you see a lot of people moving on to maybe better paying jobs.
Right, attrition comes in a variety of ways. It's not just people retiring into a government pension. It's also people who've only been there for a short time and go do something else, or people who get a private sector opportunity. I mean, it's 3 or 4 factors that relate to that.
Yeah.
So you're comfortable that attrition will be enough to generate a reduced government workforce without having to lay anybody off.
Yeah, and if you look at, the city workforce is about 5,000 people. So if you look at a 2-year transition period, that's almost a quarter of people. And not all of them, those positions wouldn't be filled. Some of them are going to be necessary and they're filled. But governments are very reliant on manpower right now because, if you look at companies, there's a front-end investment on technology and other things. And especially when you're this fragmented, finding that pool of money to invest on the front end when you're not going to realize the savings until, maybe it's somebody else's term, for example, there's not a lot of that going on. And so we have a real opportunity to innovate and to match a government structure that's pretty antiquated across the board. And St. Louis isn't unique in that way, but we live in a world where I can, order my dinner and do my holiday shopping on my phone. But if I want to go get a permit for an addition, I have to spend half a day at a city hall somewhere.
Well, let's get into one of the areas I think it's probably the most important change if we're talking about affecting the life of the average St. Louis, and particularly the average lower income St. Louis, and that's changed to the municipal court systems, which are fairly radical in this proposal. Describe for us those changes. And I know that the state made some good changes through, I believe it was Senate Bill 5 by now Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Those were some excellent changes. This goes even a little bit further. So what does this do?
So one of the things that, we were big proponents of Senate Bill 5. The Municipal League opposed it. There are
Yes, they did. I don't know how some of them. I don't know how some of them live with themselves opposing that bill.
It was nationally and locally, I think, really jarring for people to see the experiences that were so different than their own, maybe, because they were either wealthier or where they lived were so different than what was happening. And as the data showed, really prominently throughout our region. And we saw people being locked up and essentially extorted for fine money. And we had cities that were getting 60% of their revenue from their courts. Well, what this does, and Senate Bill 5 capped that amount, and it put in some really important reforms. But in a region this fragmented, what this does is says we're going to have full-time municipal courts. We'll have some satellite courts. We won't have 81. But we'll have enough where it's convenient for people to get there. And we're also going to eliminate the financial incentive to get people tickets. So the revenues from this are going to go to the county school fund. And so you're eliminating financial benefit for pulling people over. You are professionalizing the staff, so it's full-time judges and attorneys. So you don't see people who's a judge one night and an attorney the other night. And really what it's meant to do is a couple things. Restore faith in that municipal court system, because even if there's not impropriety going on there, it certainly looks ripe for it. And I think the second one is to really build out a system that is more convenient and that really respects the due process and the civil rights. So people that are working, can come during the day or in the evening when it's more convenient and handle things. You'll have these full-time courts as opposed to you have to be here in a 500-person cattle call for a 2-hour window.
And at nighttime,
Yep.
which might be more convenient for the average person, but for the average low-income person who's very potentially working not a 9-to-5 job, like on an off-hour job, those type of night court calls can be unbelievably difficult. And I thought our whole region did a lot of soul searching after Ferguson, and some of the best stuff to come out change after Ferguson was some of these changes to that municipal court system, because it is messed up the way it targets, it victimizes the poor people for nothing more than minor, mostly traffic or property offenses. I mean, incredibly minor stuff.
Well, and we heard from people that said, I did this, I sped, I didn't get a taillight fixed, but I needed money to pay that ticket or to get that fixed. And in the meantime, I got 2 more tickets from 2 different jurisdictions for the same thing, and that won't happen anymore either. And so it really puts faith back in the system and doesn't make people feel like they're essentially being abused for money.
I do want to get back to something you mentioned earlier. I definitely question why the only municipal fire department to be transferred to a fire district is you're leaving most of the county municipal fire departments alone, but you're transferring the city to a fire district. And I question that because the Post-Dispatch, it's been going on for a while, has done an excellent job of documenting a lot of abuses in the fire districts. And I think it's safe to say that the fire districts in the St. Louis region have had a lot more controversy attached to them than the municipal fire departments. And they also spend, I believe, a lot more money than the municipal fire departments. Now, in fairness to them, municipal fire departments can perhaps share a receptionist with another department. Right. They don't have to have everything on their own. So I get some of that. But why does this plan have the city transferring to a fire district?
Public safety is one of our biggest expenditures with both police and fire. And certainly 43 fire districts or different departments is not ideal at all. And even people who work in that system will tell you that. We went with courts.
I agree on that. Yeah. And that's by no means am I saying the current system is ideal.
Yeah. And police and courts, we went and tried to do, and this was something we learned from other regions too. They said you have to do the big chunk that you can get done first. And one of the things that they look at is, regions continued to reform. So it's not, our plan isn't an admonition that what we have for fire is working as best as it could or as efficiently, more importantly, as it could. But with the city, creating that fire district was necessary because the city's consolidating into the county. And so one of the things it does is allows for that continued service to be provided in the city. And the only way it really could in that geographic area with a fire board and under a fire district. And so what will happen is, I think that most people will see the same fire department that they see today in terms of where the fire stations are located and who the employees are, and they all transfer and things like that. But with fire, one of the issues of combining it was there's such disparate salaries, there's all these different functions and operations and criteria. It's much different than police, where there's fluctuations, but it's not that huge gap there. And so we think, and there's conversations ongoing right now about consolidating fire in districts, and it's coming from both within and without. Or outside of those departments. And so I think that that's something that's organically starting to happen because of the high cost that we have and the fragmentation that we have. But our focus was on police and courts primarily, and the reason for the district and the city was to continue providing that fire district or the fire service there under a district, because the city would no longer be able to manage it.
I understand that, but it is, I would hope, and I do understand why you left school districts and fire districts primarily that. You can't do you're doing a lot, you're trying to do a lot here, and I don't necessarily agree with the fire district change in the city, but I understand what you're saying. I understand you can't change absolutely everything now, but I would hope that there would be some change to the law going forward with some of particularly the smaller fire districts. I see what's happening in Hazelwood, where the Robertson Fire District
two different departments.
Tiny.
Yeah.
And the city of Hazelwood is now providing municipal fire services to parts of the old Robertson Fire, but they have to pay the fire district millions of dollars a year to, as I understand, not even do anything in there. Like the city of Hazelwood is having financial problems right now because they have to pay so much money to a fire district that they're not even providing fire services for the parts in Hazelwood anymore. Like I do think we need some reform in that area. But that, again, I understand you can't bite off every single part of the apple.
Yeah, and
everything here.
And that's absolutely right. And with schools, we started out really focusing on the city-county divide and the municipal services, and obviously the municipality is a part of that, but we didn't study schools. And so I think that if we were to offer a recommendation on schools, A, I don't know what that would be because we hadn't looked at them, and B, I don't know how that we would defend that. Some people have said, why didn't you just consolidate all the school districts? And my question is, well, what would that do? And it's not to say that, it's just that we didn't look at it, and I don't know what the answer is to that. And so, for us, it was really focused on what big things can we get done now, especially around public safety. And most regions that have been successful have done that. Even Indianapolis, which is known for the large Unigov, they did public safety, they did police and fire in 2005. And so it's really about creating a structure, and because of how we're doing it, creating a structure that can change as the community calls for it.
All right, so Dave, I understand you're changing the Constitution, so you need a statewide vote. But why can't there be a requirement in there as well that not only does it apparently have to pass statewide for that, but it also would have to pass in the city and in the county at the same time, either as part of one vote or as part of a subsequent vote. Like you've gotten state authority to do this, now we have to take it to the city and county and pass it there. Because I understand completely the concerns a number of people have that this could fail in St. Louis City and County, passed by enough statewide that it could be imposed over local objection. So why, I know it's a constitutional change, so you're going statewide, I get that.
Right.
But why not the requirement that it also pass locally?
Sure, and so we spent a good amount of time really digging into past efforts, why they failed, some of the roadblocks, and that helped shape the pathway forward too. What it comes down to is the separation of the city and the county. Unlike Indy, unlike Louisville, Nashville, is structured in our Constitution, and so it's part of that statewide document. And so we start from a different place than other regions. When we talk about the Board of Freeholders or doing subsequent votes, so the Board of Freeholders, the last time they used it, they took it to the Supreme Court and it got struck down 9-0 on one of the clauses. And so it's this really flawed document that dates back to the 1900s that doesn't allow you to consolidate police and courts. And so those are two big things.
Are you referring to when, back in the late 80s?
Yeah.
Gene McNary? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to just clarify that for people.
Yeah, and coincidentally,
Gene McNary deserves credit for trying to get this conversation
Absolutely.
started back in the 80s to try to address some of these issues back then. He's the first to tell you it didn't go anywhere,
Right.
but he fought the fight, and I don't think his plan would have gone this far, and that's maybe a good thing, maybe not, but he definitely, my little compliment to him is he deserves props for trying.
He and still is part of these conversations today too. I think his experience, and I've had frequent coffees with him just to learn and talk about a leader taking on something that bold is there's a lot of experience there, and he still has a lot of lessons to offer from it, and we certainly learn from those, and stole parts of his plan, to be quite honest. But he, for us, it's interesting because the municipal league is all about these different ways to pass it besides the constitutional amendment, and yet the municipal attorneys are the ones who sued the last time to get it struck down at the Supreme Court. So, but for us, we looked at concurrent votes, so saying we're going to have one vote, and then at the same time we're going to count the city and the county, and if it passes both of those and statewide, then it's in. One of the issues you get to with that is we're amending the Constitution. So if we were amending it on a different topic, where there's not kind of that logical nexus of this impacts St. Louis more, it would be obvious to strike it down, because essentially what you're doing is counting someone's votes twice, and so you have some equal protection problems. Then there's the idea of having a vote and then having a subsequent vote of the two, and it has to pass in each. And one of the issues we get into then is, well, you have the city and the county, but the structure that is in St. Louis now also has over a dozen other charter cities, and they get their authority straight from the Constitution as well. So do they have to get separate votes? Or, there's all these muddied waters and no clear pathway. We chose the path to say, this will get implemented. If it passes, here's what you'll have. And we know that it has the least legal hurdles to it, because past efforts are almost always stifled in the courtroom rather than at the ballot box. And so our goal was to get this proposal in front of the people and vote it up or down, and get away from all those legal traps that have kind of been the pitfalls for other plans.
As has been well covered, you made a few changes to the plan since it was first proposed. I think those changes have been smart changes.
Yep.
And I would like to see another smart change made to require the second vote, if it were to pass. It could be done in the April elections of 2021. You wouldn't have to do a special election with all those costs, just the standard April elections, which is already a set election date. So I would like to see that change passed. And then I think, to paraphrase former Senator John Lamping, who I'm going to invite to be on this show for me. I think former Senator Lamping's terrific. But as he said in one of he's having a lot of Twitter fights with people now.
I know.
But as he said in something, I do agree with him 100%. I agree with plenty that he's saying. But he says, he said if we had a local vote requirement, he'd fight his fight, and he'd wait till election night, and he'd sit back and drink beers with supporters of it, and they could watch the results come in, and everybody get along. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm not trying to get along with everybody, but I do agree that it should be at some requirement that something can't pass outside of here, fail here, and then be imposed. So I would like to see, if you're taking any advice from Dave Stokes on the public interest, that would be one change. And then we can move on to another topic, which I think is very interesting. There's been a lot of concern expressed that this would dilute minority political power, as particularly African-American political power. Obviously, with the expansion of the county council to the new 33 members, there would be a significant number of districts, either majority African-American or places where you would expect African-American representation would be elected. But there would also be, with the reduction in St. Louis City offices, citywide offices, that would be a reduction in some African-American representation. So how does Better Together respond to that which I think is a fair concern raised by the African-American political community?
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons I'll tell you that we have 33-member council in the proposal from the task force is that large number is going to be more representative of the region as a whole, both of minority communities and of the political minority group, whoever's in the minority party. That's what we learned from other regions, is you still have strong voices in groups that aren't the majority. And so they are able to really have influence. And we saw that as a positive, because we certainly don't want to dilute black political power. If anything, we really spent a lot of time and did our diligence visiting other areas and making sure that wasn't the case. And because of that, the number's larger. And those districts are a little bit larger than a state rep district, because at the time we looked at our state representative pool, and it generally reflected the demographics of our region. And so we said, with a few tweaks, those numbers are pretty accurate in terms of representing who we are in that way. And so that was something we really tried to do. What I always caution people against is looking at what we have now in St. Louis, which admittedly I think is a system most people would not draw up. And if you would, you'd probably end up in summer school for civics, and say, it's less than this, as if that's somehow the right number for us. And because I think that we're really concerned about resources as well. So you can have, we could have 500 aldermen in the city of St. Louis. Do we think that they're going to better deliver services to the residents? Or do we think having an appropriate number with the resources necessary to do that is the pathway forward? And our plan is really predicated on the second. Having good, strong representation, but for the first time, having resources so that you can address those problems. Scott Ogilvie, who's recently decided not to run at the Board of Aldermen because I think he was just frustrated by it, said it's the equivalent of owning a barber shop and somebody coming in and saying, I don't have scissors, but when I do, I'm going to give you a haircut. And that's what he felt like as an alderman. And so we really tried to strike a balance between that strong representation, but also pairing the resources with it. Because not everybody wants to be best friends with their elected officials. They want to get the services and resources for their community.
You don't have to have a majority black district to elect African Americans to office.
Absolutely.
Charlie Dooley was elected twice as
Wesley
St. Louis
Bell.
County executive. Wesley Bell is now the prosecuting attorney in what is still a fairly substantially majority white county. I think the vast majority of voters are well past looking at the race of the person they're voting for. At least I hope so. And I think the Wesley Bell and Charlie Dooley elections would suggest that they are at least in St. Louis County. And I think the results in St. Louis City show that too.
Yep, I would agree.
So we just have a few minutes left. I want to get a little more general.
Sure.
We all want to be more regional. And from our point of view, from my day job at Great Rivers Habitat Alliance, we'd like people to be thinking regionally about floodplain management as opposed to every city out for themselves. Chesterfield, Maryland Heights, etc. And it was not designed to turn this into a floodplain discussion, but as you talk to people, and I know you've had some highly contentious public forums, and
Right.
and good for you for going to the public forums, and good for the people, whether they're just wondering what it's about or adamantly opposed. Good for them to go to the events and exercise their rights and get their thoughts out into the public. But what are your thoughts on how we'll all benefit more regionally? I guess I'll end with a softball there.
Sure.
How do we get more regional on this?
Yeah, I think that's really the big question. And we knew when we rolled this out there would be a lot of fervor, a lot of loud opposition, a lot of misinformation too. There's out there, but that's why it's great that we have such a long time to do education around this. And I'll tell you that we have some public forums and they're boisterous and contentious, and we did 100 presentations in a month, and most of those presentations are more indicative of, I think, what the broader community is, which is filled with questions. You have people who are 100% for it and some people that are 100% against, but you have the majority of people in the middle that are really trying to figure out what this is about. Because I think there is a hunger for more regionalism. I think that we've seen this region declining, so Fortune 500 companies leaving, population decline. There's another article on it today. For the first time in 2010, the city and the county collectively and separately, independently, lost population. And so we're not a region that's growing, but we look at what we have, and we have some pretty great things. We have some great universities. Our amenities are second to none. Our philanthropic giving is there. So clearly people care about this. And so what we do have, though, is a government structure that lies beneath this that tells us we don't have to care about people that maybe even live a mile from us, that say, oh, that's City B's problem, I live in City A. And so what it does, and I always take this lesson back from when we visited Indianapolis, and we asked them, how do you do the big things together? How do we compete better on the Amazon bids? Not that we'll get them, or New York doesn't even think it's worth the cost at this point, but how do we compete nationally? And they said, the way that we're able to do the big things together is we do the small things together every day. Because unless you have those relationships and that trust and that regional thinking that just permeates your approach, you're not going to be able to come together on the big stuff because you're still going to think about it from your little silo. And so it really, from an economic development standpoint, is exciting and should be for the region because, you know, we have all the resources, and we talk to these other cities and they know it. A couple of them even said, you know, we're leery to even help you guys out because you have this great history, this riverfront, great bones, great structure in the region, and you could really pass us by. And, you know, one of the things that we need to get back to is doing the big, bold things. So, yeah, we had Anheuser-Busch, we had TWA, but we weren't thinking then, you know, about the good old days all the time. We're thinking about what's next. And so we should celebrate our history, but we need to become a region that does bold, exciting things again, and a region that's growing, because it's really easy to have a much better, stronger region that gets along when you can say yes and, like, we'll do this and we'll do part of this, rather than fighting over the limited resources we have. And so we have a lot of contentiousness that's there across our region. And I asked a Republican and Democrat, I said, in Indianapolis, you guys get along really well. And it's because they get to say yes to each other more. They don't have to be demonized on every issue, because not every issue is bad, and a lot of issues are bipartisan, and there's the resources to do both. And so because of that, they have better relationships, they're able to do the big, bold things and work together, and they're thriving. It looks, you know, you look at their population, growing, Louisville growing, and for every person they had 2 jobs, so their surrounding areas are growing too. That core is really central to their regional growth.
I have to say, I agree on the more regionalism. I agree on doing big, bold things together. And I know you did not mean this, but there's some people might say that, not even in Better Together, just generally. If I want to do big, bold things together as a region, provided the big, bold things is not just more corporate welfare.
Right.
Other than that, Better Together brought the mayor of Indianapolis in to give a talk, and he gave a great talk, said a lot of great things. And then he got to, and as mayor of a unified, I was able to just go and give tax credits to companies faster. And I was sitting there listening and saying, well, I don't like that part.
Well,
so other than doing big, bold things to give large corporations taxpayer money, so 100% agreement with everything you said. And as I said, I don't think that is not what you meant.
One of the things I think we actually gain back is leverage. We're able to be pitted against each other so much because we're A against B all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the current system we have, the fragmentation,
Yep.
Absolutely allows for incredible corporate welfare, where we're trying to lure businesses across city lines. It happens constantly. Walmart or
the big box stores.
The Walmart, the big box stores. Absolutely. I do my dislike of corporate welfare.
It's well known.
It should be well known.
Yeah.
But Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the thoughts. To our viewers out there, we're going to have a lot more conversations like this over the next year and a half. We're going to, as I said at the beginning, we're going to have opponents of it. We're going to have people just looking at it from an academic or journalistic perspective, asking questions, and we're going to have other supporters of it as well. So we really just look forward to this being a place where we can engage in just civil, detailed, policy-based conversation about this question, which is a huge question for our region. And if it makes it on the ballot in November 2020, will certainly be, other than a presidential race, which might get a little bit of attention, will be probably the dominant issue we'll all be focused on. So Dave, thanks again for joining us on The Public Interest with Dave Stokes.